She grabbed his arm right there between the paint cans. No warning, no introduction, just her hand on his sleeve, and tears running down her face, and a question that stopped every thought in his head cold. Would you be my child's dad just for one day? Ethan Parker stood frozen in the middle of that paint store, a stranger's hand on his arm. The smell of turpentine and linseed oil thickened the air around him, and felt the ground shift under his feet. He didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He said the only thing a man says when he knows the answer he's being given isn't the whole truth yet. Not until you tell me everything. And what she told him next changed both their lives in ways neither of them saw coming. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this is your first time here, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button. This story is going to stay with you long after it ends. The bell above the door of Hargrove's Paint and Supply made a short flat sound when Ethan Parker pushed through it at 10 minutes to 11 on a Tuesday morning. It was the kind of store that hadn't changed since 1987 and didn't intend to. The floors were raw wood-worn pale in the center of the aisles from decades of foot traffic. The shelves ran floor to ceiling, packed tight with oil paint cans, quarts and gallons, and 5-gallon buckets. Their labels faded, or handwritten, or both. The air was dense with the particular smell of linseed oil and mineral spirits, and the slow oxidizing weight of oil-based paint that had been sitting in its cans for years, breathing faintly through the seams. It was not a casual store. It was not the kind of place you wandered into on a whim. You came to Hargrove's because you knew what you needed, or because someone who knew sent you. Ethan had been coming here for 7 years. He pulled his jacket tighter against the November cold that had followed him in through the door and moved toward the back counter, a folded piece of notebook paper in his hand with 2 items written on it. The job estimate he needed to place for a commercial property repaint, and below that in smaller handwriting that belonged to his 8-year-old son Jake. Ocean blue, the real one. Dad, not the fake one. Roy Hargrove, 63 years old, built like a man who had spent his whole life lifting things, looked up from behind the counter with the mild expression of a person who has seen everything twice. Parker. Roy. Ethan unfolded the paper. Got a commercial order and 1 personal item. Personal item first, Roy said. Commercial takes time. Ethan slid the paper across the counter. Roy studied it. Ocean blue. Roy looked up. Which ocean? Ask my son. Atlantic or Pacific? He'll say both. Roy made a sound that was almost a laugh and reached under the counter for the oil paint fan deck, the professional one thick as a paperback that Hargrove's kept for contractors. Ethan leaned one elbow on the counter. His shoulders carried the specific tension of a man who had been up since 5:30. Already done 2 hours of site work and still had 4 stops to make before picking Jake up from school. He was wearing a canvas work jacket over a Henley heavy boots caked at the heel with dried clay from a job site, and the particular expression of a man who was managing barely, constantly, silently, a life that had too many moving parts and not enough hands. He had looked this way for 5 years. Since Sarah. He didn't think about it consciously anymore. It was just the weather of his life. Gray most mornings, occasionally clear. Sometimes when Jake laughed a certain way, or when a job came together perfectly, and he stood back and saw something ugly turned beautiful. Sometimes something warmer broke through, but mostly gray. Roy was flipping through the fan deck murmuring to himself about pigment ratios, and Ethan was watching the front window where November light came in at a low flat angle when he heard it. The bell above the door. He didn't turn immediately. People came in and out. That wasn't remarkable. What was remarkable was the sound that came in with her. Not a sob, not loud. The compressed, controlled sound of a person crying without wanting to be caught doing it. The kind of sound that only reaches you if you've spent time around grief, if you've learned to hear the frequencies of it, if someone you loved very much once made that exact sound in a hospital room while they thought you were asleep. Ethan knew that frequency. He turned. She was standing just inside the door, one hand pressed flat against the front of her coat, navy wool slightly worn at the cuffs, the other holding her phone at her side in a grip that was too tight. She was a plus-size woman in early 30s, with her natural hair pinned up at the back of her neck, in a way that had mostly survived the morning. Her eyes were sweeping the store in small, jerky movements, the way eyes move when a person is trying to locate something specific but can't remember exactly what they came for, or when they came for something that has nothing to do with paint. She didn't look at Ethan. She moved toward the east wall. The oil paint section floor-to-ceiling cans of Williamsburg and Gamblin and Michael Harding, and stopped in front of a row of smaller cans at eye level. Her head dropped. Her shoulders came up around her ears, and her chest rose once-twice on a breath she was clearly fighting to keep steady. Ethan watched for 1 second, then 2. Then he said, "Roy, give me a minute," and walked toward her. He wasn't sure why. He didn't analyze it. He never did with things like this. He just moved the way you move toward a sound that shouldn't be happening in an empty house, instinctively. Because something in him could not register person in distress and file it under not my business. He stopped about 3 feet away. "Hey," he said. She flinched, turned. Her eyes were dark brown and red around the edges and very, very guarded. "I'm fine," she said immediately. "Okay." He didn't move. She looked at him with the measuring expression of a woman who has learned to assess strangers quickly. "I said I'm fine." "You did. Then why are you still standing there?" "Habit," Ethan said honestly. She stared at him. "My name's Ethan," he said. "I'm not trying to bother you. I know that sound and I didn't want to walk past it." "What sound?" He didn't answer that directly. "Can I ask what you're looking for in the store? Maybe I can help. I've been coming here a long time." She held his gaze for another beat. Then, as if making a decision she wasn't entirely sure about, she turned back to the shelf. "Linseed oil," she said. "Raw, not boiled. My son uses it for a model he's building. He's been asking me for 2 weeks and I keep forgetting, and this morning he reminded me again and I just—" She stopped. Her voice had frayed at the edges. She pressed her lips together. "I just want to get one thing right today." The sentence landed quietly. "I just want to get one thing right today." Ethan knew exactly what that sentence meant. He had said it or something like it to the inside of his truck windshield more times than he could count. Raw linseed oil. He moved past her, slightly reached to the third shelf from the top, pulled down a small amber bottle. "This is the one. Winton brand. Good for models, dries clean." She looked at the bottle, then at him. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. He turned to go back to Roy, and that's when she reached out and touched his arm. Not demanding, not dramatic, just her hand on his jacket sleeve, a light, uncertain contact like a person reaching for a railing in the dark. Ethan stopped. She pulled her hand back immediately. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." "It's all right." He turned to face her. She was looking at the amber bottle in her hand. Her jaw was set the way jaws set when a person is working up to something and has been working up to it for a long time. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Her voice was careful, deliberate. "Sure." She looked up at him, and he saw it in her face before she said the words, the particular combination of courage and desperation and embarrassment that lives on a person's face when they are about to ask for something they believe they have no right to ask for. "Would you be my child's dad?" she said, "just for one day?" The oil paint store was very quiet. Somewhere in the back, Roy's paint mixer cycled off. The sudden silence was total. The November light came in through the front window at its low, flat angle and lay across the worn wood floor without warmth. Ethan Parker stood in the middle of Hargrove's Paint and Supply and looked at this woman, this stranger, this woman with red-rimmed eyes and a bottle of linseed oil in her hand. This woman who had just said the most unexpected sentence he had been handed in years and felt something in his chest do a slow, complicated turn. "No," he said. Her face didn't crumble. She'd expected it. She was already nodding, already pulling back, already preparing to say, "Of course I understand, I'm sorry," and walk out the door. "Not yet," Ethan said. She stopped. "Not until you tell me the truth," he said. "All of it. Not the version you prepared. Not the version that makes it easy for me to say yes. The real one." She looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her face. Not relief exactly. More like the particular expression of a person who has been carrying something alone for so long that even the possibility of putting it down, even temporarily, even in front of a stranger in an oil paint store, makes the muscles in their face change. The whole thing, she said quietly. Every part of it, Ethan said. She looked down at the linseed oil bottle. Then she walked to the wooden stool beside the east wall. Display the old one Roy kept for customers who were trying to compare colors and needed to sit, and she sat down on it, and she put her hands in her lap, and she looked at Ethan Parker like she was deciding whether to trust a door she'd never opened before. And she started to talk. Her name was Olivia Brooks. She lived on Carver Street, 12 minutes from where they were standing in a two-bedroom house she rented because buying had not been possible, and might not be possible for a while yet. She worked remotely data analysis spreadsheets, the kind of work that looked manageable from the outside, but required a brain running at full capacity, which became increasingly difficult when you were also the only person responsible for every school pickup, every doctor's appointment, every meal, every nightmare at 2 a.m, and every question at breakfast that deserved a better answer than, "I don't know, honey. Just eat your toast." Her son was named Noah. He was 7 years old. He had her eyes dark brown steady, the kind that took in more than they let out, and a jaw that came from somewhere else entirely, from a man named Derek, who had made his exit from their lives with the particular efficiency of someone who had decided that fatherhood did not align with his current plans. Derek Holt had not been cruel. That, Olivia said, was almost worse. A cruel man gave you something to be angry at. Derek had just been absent. Present long enough to exist in Noah's earliest months, and then not. He had signed papers 18 months in. Clean legal final. He paid nothing, and asked for nothing, and occasionally sent a text on Noah's birthday that Olivia read and deleted without showing her son. Noah did not know his father's voice. Noah did not ask about it. That was the thing that broke Olivia open every time she let herself think about it. Not that her son was angry or wounded or acting out. He wasn't. He was curious and funny and absolutely committed to the position that yellow was the superior color in every context. He was by every visible measure doing fine. But Olivia knew her son. She knew the way he watched other kids with their fathers at school pickup. The way he didn't stare. He was too careful for that. But the way his gaze would settle for just a half-second too long on a dad lifting his kid onto his shoulders, or crouching down to zip a jacket, or calling out a name from across the parking lot in that specific dad voice that cuts through noise. Just a half-second. But Olivia saw it every time. He never complains, she said. He never cries about it. He never asks me why. I think, she stopped. Her thumb moved back and forth across the linseed oil label. I think he decided a long time ago that asking me would make me feel bad, and so he just doesn't. Ethan was leaning against the shelf across from her arms, crossed loosely listening. He's 7, Ethan said. I know. 7-year-olds shouldn't be protecting their parents. No, Olivia agreed quietly. They shouldn't. Tell me about the event, Ethan said. She looked up. Because that's not the whole story either, he said. There's an event. That's why you're asking now. What is it? She took a breath. Riverside Elementary does something every year in November, she said. They call it Dad and Me Day. It's a morning 2 hours, maybe 2.5. Breakfast together in the gymnasium. Then the kids and their dads do a woodworking project. They build something small, a birdhouse, a stepping stool, something like that. And at the end, the kids present what they built to the whole group. Ethan was quiet. I've known about it since September, Olivia continued. I've been trying to solve it since September. My sister's husband offered, but he's been in Phoenix on a long-term contract since August, won't be back until January. My father passed 4 years ago. I have a neighbor, a good man, but he's 71, and his health isn't. It's not good right now. She shook her head. Noah's teacher told me Noah could participate with me. That it was fine that several moms come instead of dads, that nobody would think anything of it. But Noah wouldn't want that, Ethan said. Olivia's expression tightened. Noah said, she stopped, swallowed. He said, it's okay, Mom. I'll just go with you. And the way he said it, her voice dropped. The way he said it wasn't disappointment. It was resignation. Like a kid who's learned not to want things that aren't available to him. The store was quiet around them. Oil paint cans sat in their rows, patient and indifferent. The November light had shifted slightly toward the door. Roy had not come out from behind the counter. He was a man who understood without being told when to stay back. "That's still not all of it," Ethan said. Olivia looked at him sharply. "You walked in here and put your hand on a stranger's arm," Ethan said. "You didn't look up my address and come to my house. You didn't call the school and ask for my number. You drove to a paint store on a Tuesday morning, which means you either followed me here or you knew I'd be here. And either way, I'm not the first person you thought of, I'm the specific person you thought of. Which means Noah didn't just talk about dads at school in general." He held her gaze steadily. "He talked about me." The silence that followed was long. Olivia's hands were still in her lap. She looked at them. "How long?" Ethan asked. "Since last spring," she said. "Since April." She didn't look up. Noah came home from school in April and he was in a mood. Not a bad mood, a thoughtful one. He gets them sometimes. He'll be quiet all through dinner and then right before bed whatever he's been thinking about all day comes out. She paused. "He told me that Jake's dad had fixed Tyler Morrison's bike in the parking lot after school. Tyler had gotten the chain off and couldn't get it back on and was sitting there on the ground trying not to cry. And apparently you just stopped what you were doing and fixed it. Didn't make a thing of it. Didn't ask for anything. Just got down on the ground next to Tyler and fixed the chain and said, 'There you go, buddy,' and walked away." Ethan vaguely remembered it. He hadn't thought about it since. Noah thought that was the greatest thing he'd ever heard, Olivia said. He talked about it at dinner for 20 minutes. She smiled faintly briefly, the smile of a mother, remembering something that was sweet and painful in equal measure. "And after that he started noticing you. Every time something happened in the school parking lot or at a school event that involved you, he'd come home and tell me." She paused. "You stayed after the fall carnival to help break down the tables. You brought Jake's whole class extra granola bars on the day they ran out at the snack cart. You remembered Noah's name the third week of school and called him by it, and apparently—" Her voice softened. "Apparently that mattered more than I can explain, because Noah doesn't get called by his name by a lot of men." Ethan didn't say anything. "He started calling you Jake's dad at first," Olivia said. "And then one day he just called you Ethan. I don't know when the switch happened. He never explained it. He just—" She looked up. "He decided something about you. I don't know exactly what, but he decided it." "What did he decide?" Ethan asked quietly. Olivia looked at him for a long moment. "About 3 months ago," she said. "Noah was in bed and I was reading to him, and right in the middle of a chapter, he reached up and put his hand over the page to make me stop. And he looked at me very seriously the way he does when he's thought about something a long time, and he said—" She stopped. Her eyes filled. She didn't look away from Ethan's face. She held his gaze and she said it. "He said, 'Mom, I think Jake's dad could be my dad too. He seems like he'd be big enough to do both.'" The sentence moved through the air of the paint store like something physical. Ethan felt it land in his chest. He stayed very still. "He's 7, Olivia said. Her voice was steady now, steadied by the effort of having finally said the true thing out loud. "He doesn't understand what he was really saying. He wasn't asking me to make it happen. He was just saying what he saw, what he felt. The way kids say real things without knowing how real they are." She looked down at the linseed oil bottle. "But I heard it, and I haven't been able to unhear it since." "So you came to find me," Ethan said. "I saw your truck outside, and if I hadn't been here today—" She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. Maybe I would have found another way to ask. Maybe I wouldn't have." She looked up. "Maybe I would have kept it to myself and taken Noah to Dad and me day myself and told myself it was fine." "But it's not fine," Ethan said. "No," she said. "It's not." A long silence. Ethan looked at this woman. Olivia Brooks, Carver Street, linseed oil in her hands. Red eyes, the particular bearing of someone who has been carrying too much alone for too long and has just set some of it down on the worn wood floor of Hargrove's Paint and Supply on a Tuesday in November. He thought about Jake. I thought about Jake saying at dinner last week, "Dad, Noah's really good at drawing. He drew this whole map of an imaginary country, and it had cities and everything. It was so cool." And Ethan had said, "That sounds awesome." And then they'd talked about something else, and Ethan had filed Noah Brooks away as Jake's friend and not thought more about it. I thought about what it meant that a 7-year-old boy had spent 6 months quietly collecting evidence that a man he barely knew was the shape of something missing from his life. He thought about Sarah. He thought about the promise. Don't let Jake grow up in a house where love stopped. He uncrossed his arms. "One morning," he said. Olivia went still. "Dad and me day, one morning. I stay for the event, we build the birdhouse or whatever it is, and I'm there for Noah the same way I'm there for Jake. Equal, both of them." "Yes," she said immediately. "I want to tell Jake first, tonight. He should know his friend is going to be there and that I'm going to be with both of them. He doesn't get surprised by this." "Of course. And I want to meet Noah before the event. Not the morning of, before. A few days ahead somewhere casual, so he's not walking into the gym seeing me for the first time with a crowd of people around." Olivia blinked, like she hadn't expected that level of thought. "Okay," she said softly. "And Olivia?" She looked at him. "After the event," he said, "you and I talk, not about logistics, about what this actually is and what it isn't. Because your son has formed an attachment to a person he doesn't really know, and that's something we need to handle carefully and honestly, and I won't pretend it's simpler than it is, just because one morning went well." She was very quiet. "Is that fair?" he asked. "That's more than fair," she said. He nodded. He reached out his hand. She looked at it. Then she shifted the linseed oil bottle to her left hand and reached out and shook his hand. A firm, real handshake, the kind between two people entering into something they both understand is serious. "Give me your number," Ethan said, pulling out his phone. They exchanged numbers, standing in the oil paint aisle of Hargrove's between the Williamsburg and the Gamblin cans, while Roy pretended to study an invoice behind the counter, and the November light moved slowly across the worn wood floor. When it was done, Ethan pocketed his phone. "Go pay for the linseed oil," he said. "Raw. Good choice for the model. Make sure he uses a thin coat." Olivia almost laughed. "You know about model building too. Jake went through a phase." Ethan picked up his folded estimate paper from the counter where he'd set it down. "Roy in the back is going to take a while on my order. He'll ring you up first." He moved back toward the counter. "Ethan." He turned. Olivia Brooks was standing in the east wall aisle of Hargrove's Paint and Supply, holding a small amber bottle of raw linseed oil. Her coat slightly wrinkled her hair, winning its slow battle with the pin that held it. Her eyes still a little red at the edges. She looked, Ethan thought, like someone who had just set down a very heavy bag she had been carrying without help for a very long time. "Why did you say yes?" she said. "Really? You could have just said no. Most people would have." Ethan considered the question. "Because a kid chose someone," he said. "Without being asked to. Without any agenda. He just looked around and pointed and said that one. And I think that deserves to be taken seriously." Olivia was quiet. "Also," Ethan said, "I know what it is to raise a child alone. And I know what it is to watch your kid carry something heavy without complaining about it." He paused. "Noah's not the only one doing that." She held his gaze, and then very carefully, the way someone nods when they've understood something that goes past language, she nodded. Ethan turned back to Roy. The paint mixer started again in the back, and Ethan Parker stood at the counter of Hargrove's Paint and Supply with his estimate paper in his hand, already thinking about what he was going to say to Jake tonight, already thinking about a 7-year-old boy who had looked at the shape of what was missing from his life, and without hesitation, without calculation, without asking permission, had pointed at him. He told himself it was just one morning. He told himself it was a simple thing. He told himself he was only doing what any decent person would do, what any reasonable neighbor would do, what anyone with a working conscience and a free Tuesday morning would do when a child needed something, and the ask was clear. He told himself all of that. and the oil paint smell moved through the store, linseed and mineral spirits, and decades of color mixed and matched and chosen by people trying to make something look exactly right. And somewhere in the back of his mind, in the quiet place where he kept the things he didn't look at directly, something that had been very still for 5 years moved slightly. Just slightly. Just enough to know it was still there. 3 days. That was all Ethan gave himself to think about it before he had to do the first hard thing. He waited until Jake had finished his homework, eaten his dinner, and brushed his teeth, the whole ritual of an ordinary Tuesday night, and then he sat on the edge of Jake's bed, the way he always did before lights out, and he said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something." Jake looked up from the book he'd been pretending to read. He was a perceptive kid. He knew the difference between his dad's regular voice and his dad's something is happening voice, and he had clocked this one immediately. "Did I do something?" Jake asked. "No, nothing like that." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know your friend Noah Brooks?" Jake's face opened up. "Yeah, Noah's the best. He drew this whole map at recess yesterday, like a whole country with roads and everything. He named the capital city Jakeville, after me." Something moved in Ethan's chest. "He named it after you. He said I could be king." "That's a good friend," Ethan said. "He really is, Dad. He's one of the best ones." Jake set the book down entirely now. "What about him?" Ethan chose his words the way you choose footing on uncertain ground, carefully weight distributed. "Noah doesn't have a dad at home. You know that." Jake's expression went serious. "Yeah, he told me. He said his dad doesn't live with them." A pause. "He doesn't really talk about it that much." "No, he probably doesn't." Ethan clasped his hands together. "His school has this event coming up, Dad and Me Day. And Noah's mom reached out to me. She asked if I'd be willing to come and be there for Noah that morning. So he's not the only kid without a dad there." Jake stared at him. "You'd come for Noah," Jake said slowly. "I'd come for both of you," Ethan said. "It wouldn't be just for Noah. It'd be me with both of you. Together. Is that how would you feel about that?" Jake was quiet for a moment that felt longer than it was. Ethan watched his son's face go through something private and real, the internal calculation of an 8-year-old boy working out something that mattered. Then Jake said, "Noah talks about you, Dad." Ethan went still. "He does. He says you're the only grown-up at school who remembers his name without checking the list." Jake picked at the edge of his book cover. "He told me once that you feel like what he thinks a dad is supposed to feel like." He got embarrassed after he said it. "He told me not to tell you." The room was quiet. "I'm telling you anyway," Jake said, "because I think you should know." Ethan looked at his son, this 8-year-old boy with his mother's eyes and his own stubbornness and a heart that had somehow come out of 5 years of hard weather, still completely intact, and he felt something press against the inside of his ribs. "Yeah." Ethan said, his voice slightly rougher than he intended. "Yeah, I think you're right." Jake nodded with the satisfied gravity of someone who had made a correct decision. "I think you should come, Dad. Noah deserves a good morning." "He does?" Ethan said. "And Dad?" "Yeah." "Can we get him something like a small thing to put in his toolbox for the woodworking project?" Jake's voice was casual, but his eyes were not. His eyes were entirely serious. "Because I know Noah doesn't have a lot of his own tools, and I don't want him to feel behind." Ethan looked at his son for a long moment. "Yeah, buddy," he said, and his voice came out quieter than he meant it to. "We can do that." He turned off the light. He stood in the hallway outside Jake's door for a long moment in the dark, one hand still on the doorframe. "He says you feel like what he thinks a dad is supposed to feel like." He hadn't been anyone's version of a dad except Jake's. He hadn't tried to be. But something had happened anyway in the parking lots and the hallways and the ordinary edges of school days without his knowing it. And now he had to decide what to do with that. He went downstairs, poured himself a glass of water, stood at the kitchen counter, and picked up his phone. He texted Olivia, talked to Jake. "He's in. When can we set up the meeting with Noah?" Her response came back in under a minute, like she'd been waiting. "Saturday morning. There's a park near Carver Street. Neutral ground. Casual. I'll tell Noah we're meeting Jake and his dad. Nothing more than that. Ethan typed back Saturday at 10. Works. 3 dots appeared. Then, thank you, Ethan. I mean it. He put the phone down. He didn't type back. Some things didn't need a reply. Saturday came the way. November. Saturdays always came. Gray sky, cold air. The particular quiet of a town that was sleeping in an extra hour. Ethan took Jake to the park at 5 minutes to 10 with a small wrapped package in Jake's jacket pocket, a set of 3 small screwdrivers, quality ones, the kind that fit in a child's hand but were built to last. Jake had picked them out himself at the hardware store. He'd spent 12 minutes deciding. They were on the climbing structure when Olivia arrived. Ethan saw her first. She was walking the path from the Carver Street entrance with Noah beside her, and even from 40 yards away, Ethan could read the careful neutrality she was holding herself to the deliberate, unhurried pace, the way she wasn't pulling him along or pushing him forward, just walking beside him and letting him set the tempo. Noah was smaller than Ethan had expected. He didn't know why he'd expected something different. 7-year-olds were 7-year-olds. But there was something about knowing someone's internal life before you knew their face that made the meeting strange. Noah Brooks was shorter than Jake by about 2 inches, with his mother's eyes and a yellow knit hat pulled down over his ears and a very focused expression on his face. The expression of a boy who was thinking hard about something and wasn't ready to stop. Jake saw him first. Noah. He dropped off the climbing bar without ceremony and ran across the grass with the abandon of an 8-year-old who had not yet learned to make his enthusiasm smaller. I didn't know you'd be here. Noah's face changed completely. The focused expression broke open into something unguarded and bright. Jake. He ran too, and they met in the middle in the way only kids run toward each other, like the last few feet don't exist. Ethan walked over slowly. He gave them 30 seconds. Let them do their thing. Olivia reached him at the same moment. They stood side by side, watching their sons circle each other with the rapid overlapping conversation of best friends, catching up after 2 days, which in second-grade time was a significant absence. He's been talking about this since I told him yesterday, Olivia said quietly. Which part? The park. Jake. A small pause. You. Ethan glanced at her. He got quiet after I said your name, Olivia said. The thinking kind of quiet. He didn't ask questions. He just went quiet and stayed that way for about 10 minutes, and then he said, Mom, should I act like I don't know who he is? What did you say? I said no. I said he should just be himself. She watched Noah demonstrate something to Jake with his hands, some complicated point that required a lot of arm movement. I said the best thing he could do was exactly what he was already doing. They stood there a moment in the cold. Then Noah turned. He looked at Ethan. The way kids look at things they've thought about a long time, with an intensity that was completely unself-conscious. Not starstruck. Not shy. Just deeply, openly attentive. Like a person looking at something they recognize but have never seen before. Ethan walked toward him. He crouched down when he got close. Eye level. The way you do it when you're serious about meeting a person. Hey Noah, he said. Hi, Noah said. I'm Jake's dad, Ethan. I know, Noah said. Just that. No qualification. No apology for knowing. I know with the calm certainty of a kid who had been keeping a quiet, careful account of someone for 6 months. Jake says you drew a map with a capital city named after him, Ethan said. Noah's expression shifted toward something that was almost a smile. He told you about that. He told me you made him king. He's a good king, Noah said seriously. He doesn't make bad laws. Jake, standing 2 feet away, straightened up with tremendous dignity. I would never make bad laws. Ethan looked at Noah. What kind of project do you think we're going to build at the woodworking event? Noah blinked, like he hadn't expected the question to come that fast. A birdhouse, he said. Mrs. Keller told us last week. You get to paint it whatever color you want after. What color are you thinking? Noah didn't hesitate. Yellow. Ethan nodded. Good choice. Noah studied him. Jake said you know a lot about building things. Some things. Jake said you built a deck behind your house. I did. Did you mess it up the first time? Ethan laughed. A real one, short and surprised. The first and second time. Noah considered this. But you kept going. I kept going. Noah nodded slowly, like this was important information that he was filing away carefully. Then he said, "Is it okay if I call you Ethan?" "It's my name," Ethan said. "Some grown-ups don't like kids using their first name." "I'm not one of those grown-ups." Something passed across Noah's face so brief, Ethan almost missed it. A loosening. A small private exhale of something that had been held. "Okay," Noah said. Jake grabbed Noah's arm. "Come on, the good part of the climbing thing is on the other side." And then they were running again, the way they ran at the beginning. Like the last few feet didn't exist. And Ethan straightened up slowly and stood in the cold November air and watched them go. Olivia was beside him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then she said, "You crouched down." "What?" "When you went to meet him, you crouched down so you were at his level." Her voice was neutral, careful, holding something steady. "Most grown-ups don't do that. They stand over kids and talk down. You just went to where he was." Ethan shrugged. "It's basic." "It's not," Olivia said quietly. "It's really not." They stood there watching the boys climb, and the morning moved forward around them, carrying them with it. The week before Dad and Me Day was the longest week Ethan had spent in recent memory, and not because it was eventful. It was the opposite. It was ordinary in every visible way, jobs to quote invoices to send Jake's homework, dinners, bedtimes. But underneath the ordinary surface, something was running at a different frequency, and Ethan was aware of it the way you're aware of a sound you can't quite place in a house you've lived in a long time. Olivia texted twice. Once to confirm the event time, 8:30, Riverside Elementary Gymnasium, continental breakfast first. Once to ask if Noah could give Jake something. Ethan said of course. The next day, Jake came home from school with a folded piece of paper in his backpack. "Noah made this," Jake said, handing it over without ceremony. "He said to give it to you." Ethan unfolded it at the kitchen table. It was a drawing. Detailed, careful, the kind of drawing a kid makes when they are trying very hard to get something right. Two figures, one tall, one shorter, standing side by side in front of something that might have been a birdhouse or might have been a house. They were holding something between them. Tools, maybe. Below the drawing, in the particular handwriting of a child who had been taught print but was already inventing his own version of it, were 3 words. "This is us." Ethan sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Jake was in the other room. The television was on. Normal sounds, normal evening. But Ethan sat there with a 7-year-old boy's drawing in his hands and felt something inside him that he hadn't felt in years. Not the grief, not the exhaustion, but something adjacent to hope, and it scared him in a way that grief never had. Grief was something you knew, something you could name and carry and eventually organize around. Hope was something else entirely. He put the drawing on the refrigerator. He stood back and looked at it, and he thought, all right. The morning of Dad and Me Day arrived with the specific energy of a morning that has been anticipated too long, slightly too bright, slightly too much. Ethan was up at 5:30, not because he'd set an alarm, but because he'd barely slept, and he spent the first hour of the morning doing the things he always did. Coffee, the brief, silent accounting of what needed to happen today. The particular discipline of not letting his mind get ahead of itself. Jake came downstairs at 7 with his hair still pressed flat on one side from sleep. "Is today?" Jake said. "Today's the day." "I'm ready." "You haven't eaten breakfast." "I'll be ready after breakfast." They ate cereal together at the kitchen table, Jake talking, Ethan listening the comfortable rhythm of their mornings. And then they got dressed and got in the truck, and Ethan drove toward Riverside Elementary through streets that were still half dark in the early November morning. He texted Olivia when they pulled into the parking lot. "Here." Her response, "We're inside. Noah's already at the breakfast table. He's been there since 8. Ethan looked at the message. Then he put his phone in his pocket and looked at Jake. "You good?" he said. "I'm good," Jake said. "Are you good?" "I'm good." They were clearly both lying slightly, and they both knew it, and neither of them said so. They got out of the truck. The gymnasium of Riverside Elementary had been transformed the way school gymnasiums get transformed for events. Round tables with paper tablecloths, a continental breakfast spread along the back wall, a cluster of activity stations with tools and wood pieces and paint. The room was filling steadily, fathers and sons, mostly a few grandfathers, a few mothers, standing in for absent dads. The particular organized chaos of 40 people trying to find their seats at once. Ethan saw Noah before Noah saw him. The boy was sitting at a round table near the center of the room alone, except for his yellow knit hat on the chair beside him. His hands were in his lap. He was watching the door. He'd been watching the door. When Noah's eyes found Ethan, something happened in his face that Ethan felt all the way across the gymnasium floor. Not just relief. Relief was the surface of it. Underneath was something deeper and older and more complicated. The particular expression of a child who had been quietly afraid that the thing they'd been hoping for wasn't real, and then had the moment of discovering that it was. Noah stood up. Jake broke away from Ethan's side and crossed the room fast, sliding into the seat beside Noah with the carelessness of a kid settling in next to his best friend. Noah sat back down, and whatever had been tight in his face loosened immediately. Ethan walked over and pulled out the chair across from them. "You wore the hat," he said. Noah touched the yellow knit hat on the chair beside him. "My mom got it for me. She said yellow was a good color for today." She was right. Noah looked at him. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Ethan held his gaze. "I said I would." "People say things," Noah said simply. Not accusatory, not sad. Just stating a fact that he had apparently learned and organized into the architecture of how the world worked. Something shifted in Ethan's jaw. "I know they do," he said. "But when I say something, I mean it." "Okay." Noah looked at him for a moment that was longer than a 7-year-old's gaze usually ran. Then he nodded. Breakfast moved fast. Orange juice muffins, the low noise of the room settling into itself. Ethan found himself in conversation with the father at the next table, a man named Greg, who had a third grader and strong opinions about the Little League situation in the district. Normal conversation, easy. But every few minutes, his eyes moved back to Noah, and Noah, without trying to make it obvious, without doing it in a way that could be called clingy or desperate, kept his attention on Ethan the same way. Checking. Confirming. Making sure. "You're still here. I'm still here." The woodworking stations opened at 9, and the room reorganized itself around the tables of tools and pre-cut wood pieces. The project was a birdhouse simple, but with enough steps to be real work. Ethan settled in between Jake and Noah without having to direct it. It just happened, the three of them finding their position around the table, Ethan demonstrating the first join, both boys watching intently. Jake went first. He was precise, careful, his tongue pressed between his teeth in concentration. He got the corner right on the second try. Noah went second. He picked up the small screwdriver, one of the 3-piece set from Jake's pocket, which Jake had presented at breakfast, with the offhanded casualness of a kid who wanted to give a gift without making it a production, and he held it correctly, thumb and forefinger, and Ethan put his hand over Noah's briefly to adjust the angle, and Noah went still under the contact for just a moment. A very small stillness, the kind you only notice if you're paying attention. Then he drove the screw. First try. "Nice," Ethan said. Noah looked at the screwdriver, then at the wood, then sideways at Ethan. "My dad should have taught me this," he said. The sentence came out quietly, without drama. The way children say true things, not performing them, just releasing them, because they've been held long enough. Jake went very still. Ethan kept his voice even. "Maybe. But you just learned it yourself." Noah thought about that. "Is that the same thing?" "It's better," Ethan said, "because you know you did it." Noah looked at the screw he'd driven. He didn't say anything else, but his grip on the screwdriver changed slightly, firmer, slightly more settled, and he reached for the next piece of wood. The morning moved through its hours. The birdhouses came together. The room was loud with the specific productive noise of fathers and children working side by side. The occasional instructions from the teachers circulating among the tables, the low murmur of adult conversation. Ethan helped where he was needed and stepped back where he wasn't. At one point, Jake and the boy from the next table got into an involved disagreement about the best way to get a hinge to sit flush that required Ethan to mediate with the solemnity of a man adjudicating an international treaty. He did it without laughing, which was a genuine act of will. Noah watched the whole thing with an expression that could only be described as fond. They were painting the birdhouses when it happened. The gymnasium door opened. Ethan didn't notice it immediately. He was helping Jake with the second coat on a particularly stubborn corner, and the door opening was not remarkable in itself. People had been going in and out all morning. But something changed in the room. A small shift. The particular adjustment of attention that happens when a new variable enters a space. He looked up. A man was standing in the gymnasium doorway. Tall, mid-30s leather jacket. The particular posture of a person who is accustomed to being looked at. He was scanning the room with focused, methodical attention, not the uncertain scan of a visitor trying to find someone. The precise hunting scan of someone who knew exactly who they were looking for. His eyes landed on Olivia, who had arrived 20 minutes earlier and taken a quiet seat at the parent table along the wall, and then moved immediately to the table where Ethan sat with Noah and Jake. They stayed there. Ethan felt the weight of it before he fully understood it. Beside him, Noah had gone completely still. Not the engaged stillness of concentration. The rigid, airless stillness of a child who has recognized something they weren't prepared to encounter. His paintbrush had stopped moving. His eyes were on the man in the doorway. "Noah," Ethan said quietly. Noah didn't answer. "Hey." Ethan kept his voice low. "Look at me." Slowly, like a camera pulling focus. Noah's gaze moved from the doorway to Ethan's face. He looked like a boy who had just had the floor shift under him and was trying to figure out if he was falling. "Do you know that man?" Ethan asked. Noah's jaw was tight. "That's my dad," he said. His voice was flat in a way that children's voices aren't usually flat. "He doesn't come. He never comes." Ethan held Noah's gaze. "Stay here," he said. "Paint your birdhouse. I'm right here." "What if he—" "I'm right here," Ethan said again. Steady, certain. The way you say a thing when you need it to be a foundation. Noah looked at him. Then he picked up his paintbrush. Across the room. Olivia had stood up. Her face had gone the color of paper. Derek Holt walked into the gymnasium like a man who owned the floor under him. He moved toward the parent table, first toward Olivia, and Ethan watched the exchange from across the room without being able to hear it. He watched Olivia's face stay carefully controlled. He watched Derek gesture toward the table where Ethan sat. He watched Olivia shake her head once the tight motion of a woman holding a line. Then Derek walked toward Ethan's table. He stopped on the opposite side. He looked at Ethan the way men look at each other when they're assessing something territorial. "You're Ethan Parker," he said. "I am," Ethan said. "I'm Derek Holt, Noah's father." He said it the way someone plants a flag. Ethan looked at him. Then he glanced at Noah, who was painting or performing painting his brush moving on the surface of the birdhouse in small mechanical strokes, his eyes down his whole body, holding itself in a very careful shape. "Okay," Ethan said. "I don't think it is," Derek said. "I heard there was another man here with my son." "I'm here with my son," Ethan said. "Jake, he's sitting right there." He nodded toward Jake, who had gone quiet and watchful the way perceptive children go quiet when they sense that something adult is happening. "Noah's Jake's best friend. We're here together." Derek's eyes moved to Noah. Something flickered in his expression. Not tenderness. Something more complicated and less comfortable. "You have no relationship with my son," Derek said. "I know that," Ethan said. "Then I don't understand what you're doing here." "I'm building a birdhouse," Ethan said simply, "with my son and his best friend." Derek's jaw tightened. "You don't have any right to—" "Derek." Olivia's voice came from 2 feet behind him. She had moved across the room without either man noticing. Her voice was steady in a way that told Ethan it was costing her something. "This isn't the place." "You had him come here," Derek said, turning on her. "You had a stranger come here and act like—" "I invited Jake's dad to keep both boys company," Olivia said, "which you would have known if you had responded to a single one of my messages about this event." "I didn't get—" "You got them," she said. The silence between them was old and dense with things that had already been said and said and said, and resolved nothing. Derek turned back to Ethan. "This family isn't yours," he said. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't shift in his chair or stand up or perform anything. He said evenly and quietly, "You're right, it's not." Derek blinked. He had expected something different. "But that boy?" Ethan continued nodding toward Noah. "Painted half his birdhouse yellow because it makes him feel like he's waking up inside a sunny day. And he drove his first screw this morning. And in about 20 minutes, he's going to stand up in front of this room and present what he built." He held Derek's gaze. "And I'm going to be sitting here when he does it." The gymnasium had gone almost entirely quiet. 40 people not looking at them and seeing everything. Derek looked at Ethan for a long moment. Then he looked at Noah. Noah had stopped pretending to paint. I was looking at his father with an expression that broke Ethan's heart cleanly in two, because it wasn't anger, and it wasn't longing, and it wasn't hurt. It was the careful, watchful blankness of a child who had learned to make himself very small and very quiet when certain things happened. Who had learned to take up as little space as possible and wait for the weather to pass. Derek saw it. Something moved in his face. He looked away. He put his hands in his pockets. "I'll be in the hall," he said. To no one in particular, to Olivia, to himself. He walked out of the gymnasium. The door closed behind him. The room breathed. Ethan turned back to the table. Jake was watching him with enormous eyes. "You okay?" Ethan said to Jake. "Yeah," Jake said in the voice of someone who was mostly okay. He looked at Noah. Noah was looking at the birdhouse, at the yellow paint, at his own hands. "He came," Noah said, very quietly. "He did," Ethan said. "He never comes." "I know." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Why did he come now?" Ethan could have said something complicated. He could have navigated the delicate landscape of because someone told him another man was here, and because adults sometimes do things for reasons that have nothing to do with you, and because showing up for the wrong reason is still showing up. He didn't. He said, "I don't know, Noah." Noah nodded. Like this was the most honest answer, and therefore the most useful. "Does it matter?" Jake asked. And it was such a Jake thing to ask, practical and direct, cutting right to the engine of the question. Noah thought about it. "Not right now," he said. "Right now I want to finish my birdhouse." He picked up his paintbrush. The yellow birdhouse took on its final coat, and Ethan Parker sat between his son and his son's best friend in the gymnasium of Riverside Elementary on a Thursday morning in November. And he did not think about Derek Holt in the hallway, and he did not think about what came next, and he did not think about the drawing on his refrigerator that said, "This is us," in the handwriting of a 7-year-old who had decided something about him months before they met. He watched Noah paint. He handed Jake the fine brush for the detail work. He stayed. When the presentations came, Noah Brooks stood up at the front of the gymnasium with his yellow birdhouse held in both hands, and he said into the microphone in the clear, careful voice of a boy who had practiced this, "I built this with my friend's dad, Ethan. He showed me how to drive a screw. He didn't do it for me, he just showed me. And I did it myself." He looked out at the room. His eyes found Ethan's. "It took me one try," Noah said. And Ethan Parker, 35 years old, single father man, who had not cried in a gymnasium since the night his wife's favorite song came on during a middle school fundraiser 2 years ago, and he'd had to excuse himself to the hallway, sat in a metal folding chair in a Riverside Elementary gymnasium, and felt something move in the back of his throat that he was not going to do anything about. He nodded at Noah. Noah nodded back. He sat down. Jake leaned over and said in a stage whisper that was audible to the entire table, "Dad, are you crying?" "No," Ethan said. "Your eyes look like—" "They don't. They really—" "Jake." Jake sat back. He was trying not to smile and failing. Across the room, Olivia was watching Ethan with an expression he couldn't fully read from here, something layered and quiet and very awake. He looked away. The morning ended, the way good things end too quickly, with the sense of having been handed something you didn't know you needed and weren't sure yet how to hold. Parents gathered children and coats. Birdhouses were carefully transported. The gymnasium returned to itself. Outside in the hallway, Derek Holt was gone. Ethan didn't know when he'd left and didn't ask. He walked out to the parking lot with Jake on one side and Noah on the other. Noah with his yellow birdhouse tucked under his arm, like something precious, which it was. And when they reached the point where the paths split, Noah stopped. He looked at Ethan. "Will you come again?" Noah asked. "Not to a thing. Just will you come again?" Ethan looked at this boy. 7 years old. Yellow hat, a birdhouse that he had built with his own hands and presented in front of 40 people without flinching. He thought about what he was going to say. He thought about being careful. He thought about walls and distance and the very good reasons he had constructed those things. Then he thought about the drawing on his refrigerator. "This is us." "Yeah," Ethan said. "I'll come again." Noah looked at the birdhouse, then at Ethan. "Okay," he said. Not with relief. Not with the explosive gratitude of a kid who'd been afraid. Just okay. Settled. Like something that had been uncertain was now certain, and uncertainty was the only thing that had ever been the problem. He walked back to Olivia. Ethan watched him go. Jake pulled on his sleeve. "Dad, can Noah come over Saturday?" "Call his mom and ask," Ethan said. "You have her number," Jake pointed out. Ethan looked at his son. Jake looked back at him with the patient expression of someone waiting for a grown-up to catch up to something that was already obvious. "I'll text her," Ethan said. Jake nodded, satisfied, like a small diplomatic mission had been successfully completed. They got in the truck. And as Ethan pulled out of the Riverside Elementary parking lot, he looked in the rearview mirror once. Olivia and Noah were standing by her car. Noah was holding the birdhouse up, showing his mother something on the underside of it, a detail, some small thing that mattered to him, and Olivia was bent forward, looking at whatever he was showing her, and she was smiling. Not the careful smile of a woman managing things, a real one, the kind that comes when a morning goes better than you dared let yourself hope. Ethan looked back at the road. He drove. But he was already thinking about Saturday. And he told himself it was just because Jake had asked. He told himself that. All the way home. Saturday came, and Noah came with it. He showed up at Ethan's front door at 9:15, with his yellow birdhouse under one arm and a backpack over one shoulder, and Olivia standing 2 steps behind him, with the careful expression of a woman who was trying very hard not to read too much into the fact that her son had packed a bag for a playdate like he was going somewhere important. Jake opened the door before Ethan reached it. "You brought the birdhouse," Jake said. "I wanted to show you something on the bottom," Noah said, already stepping inside like he'd been here before. "I put a secret mark on it." Jake pulled him toward the stairs immediately, the birdhouse and the secret mark apparently requiring urgent investigation. Ethan looked at Olivia. She looked at the empty doorway where her son had just disappeared. "He talked about today all week," she said. "Jake too," Ethan said. "You want to come in, coffee's on." She hesitated for exactly 1 second. The kind of hesitation that isn't about the coffee. "Sure," she said. They sat at the kitchen table, the way 2 people sit when they're being careful with each other, not distant, not close, but measured. Ethan poured the coffee. From upstairs came the sound of feet on the floor, and Noah's voice explaining something with great intensity, and Jake responding with equal intensity, the particular frequency of 2 kids, deep inside something that mattered only to them. "He slept with the birdhouse next to his bed," Olivia said. Ethan looked at her, not hugging it or anything, just next to it, on the nightstand. She wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. "He said he wanted to see it when he woke up, to make sure it was real." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Is it real?" he said. "For you, I mean, this." He gestured vaguely at the kitchen at the house at the sound of their sons upstairs. Are you okay with how fast it's moving? Olivia considered the question seriously, the way she considered all serious questions, with a stillness that was not hesitation, but thought. I'm terrified, she said. If that's what you're asking. That's what I'm asking. But I'm more terrified of what it looks like if I pull him back now. She looked at the mug. Noah has been careful with people his whole life. He doesn't attach easily. He watches and waits and makes up his mind slowly. She paused. Except with you. With you, he didn't wait at all. And that either means I should trust it, or it means I need to protect him from it. And I cannot figure out which one. Both, Ethan said. She looked up. Trust it and protect him from it, Ethan said. At the same time, that's the job. She looked at him for a long moment. How are you so calm about this? She asked. I'm not calm, Ethan said. I'm just used to not having the option to panic. Something moved through her expression that was almost a smile and almost something sadder. I know that feeling, she said. They were still sitting there when Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Unknown number, local area code. He let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again 30 seconds later. Same number. He picked it up. Parker. A pause. Then a voicemail even controlled. Mr. Parker, my name is Derek Holt. I think we need to talk. The kitchen went very quiet. Ethan looked at Olivia. Something in his face must have changed because she straightened immediately, eyes sharpening. I'm listening, Ethan said. Not on the phone, Derek said. In person. I can meet you anywhere you want. Coffee shop, wherever. I just need 30 minutes. Ethan considered. He could say no. He had no obligation to this man. Derek Holt had signed his name on a document 7 years ago that amounted to a formal statement that he was choosing to be absent from his son's life, and whatever had changed in his calculation recently was not Ethan's problem. But a boy had looked at his father in a gymnasium 2 days ago with that carefully blank face. That face of a child who has learned to make himself small. And Ethan thought if there was something Derek Holt needed to say, and he said it to Ethan instead of to Noah's mother, then Ethan needed to hear it before it got said some other way, in some other context. Tomorrow morning, Ethan said. 8 o'clock, Miller's on 5th. I'll be there, Derek said. Ethan hung up. Olivia was watching him. That was Derek. Yes. He called you. He wants to meet. The silence had a specific texture to it. The texture of two people recalibrating around a new variable, both running their own internal calculations at the same time. You don't have to, Olivia said. I know. Ethan. I want to hear what he has to say, Ethan said. Before he says it somewhere I can't manage. She held his gaze. He's going to try to make this about territory. Probably. He didn't come to that gymnasium because he wanted to be Noah's father, she said, and her voice was flat with the particular flatness of a woman who has spent 7 years understanding a man's motives. He came because someone told him another man was there. That's the only thing that moved him. I know that too, Ethan said. Then why? Because Noah deserves for the adults in his life to handle themselves like adults, Ethan said. Even the ones who don't deserve to be in his life. Olivia looked at him. She pressed her lips together, nodded once. The tight nod of someone accepting something they don't fully like. Tell me how it goes, she said. I will. From upstairs, Noah's voice floated down. Jake, I'm telling you, if you put the hook on the left side, it's going to swing the wrong direction. Jake, it's my birdhouse. Noah, I'm trying to help. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. They're going to argue about birdhouses for the next 3 hours. Probably. Ethan agreed. Is that okay? He looked at her. That's what brothers do. The word landed between them. He hadn't planned to say it, but he didn't take it back. Olivia looked at her coffee. Her thumb moved around the rim of the mug once. When she looked up, her eyes were carefully steady. Yeah, she said quietly. I guess it is. Miller's on Fifth was the kind of diner that had been there since before either of them was born. Wood-paneled booths, coffee that came in a ceramic mug before you asked a menu that hadn't been updated since 2003 and didn't need to be. Ethan arrived at 5 to 8. Derek was already there in the corner booth, jacket off, hands on the table. He looked in daylight and without the gymnasium crowd around him, less like a man making a territorial claim and more like a man who hadn't been sleeping well. Ethan slid into the booth across from him. The waitress poured coffee without asking. "Good diner." "You came," Derek said. "I said I would." Derek looked at him for a moment. "I didn't expect that." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. A lawyer's letter. A door in my face." He wrapped his hands around his mug. "Not the actual man in an actual diner." "I'm not hard to find," Ethan said. "Or apparently hard to call." Derek acknowledged that with a slight tilt of his head. "I got your number from a mutual connection, Roy Hargrove." Ethan blinked. "Roy. He said you were a straight shooter. Said if I wanted to understand what was happening with my son, I should talk to you directly." Derek's jaw moved. "I didn't know whether to be grateful or insulted that Roy Hargrove is apparently more connected to my son's life than I am." "Are you?" Ethan said. "Insulted." "I don't know what I am," Derek said, and the honesty of it landed differently than Ethan expected. Not like a performance, not like a strategy, but like a man saying the truest thing available to him. "I saw you with Noah in that gymnasium, and I felt—" He stopped. "What did you feel?" Ethan said. Derek looked at his coffee. "Like someone had taken something that was mine." "Noah's not yours," Ethan said. Quiet, without heat. "You made a legal decision about that 7 years ago. I know what I did." "Then you know why what you felt in that gymnasium wasn't about Noah," Ethan said. "Not really." Derek looked at him sharply. "If it was about Noah," Ethan said, "you would have felt it 3 years ago, 2 years ago. You would have felt it every birthday you sent a text instead of showing up. What you felt in that gymnasium was about you. About seeing someone else in a space you left empty, and realizing the space didn't stay empty." The diner hummed around them. Coffee. Quiet conversation from another booth. The sound of plates. Derek said nothing for a long moment. Then, "You're right." Ethan waited. "I've been telling myself for years that I was doing the right thing," Derek said. "That a father who wasn't ready was worse than no father. That staying away was protecting him." He turned his mug in a slow circle. "I believed that. I think I really believed it." "And now," Ethan said, "now I've seen my son stand up in front of 40 people and say a stranger showed him something, and he did it himself in one try." Derek's voice cracked on the last word barely, but Ethan heard it. "And I thought that should have been me." Ethan said yes, it should have. Derek flinched. "I'm not going to tell you you're a good person for finally feeling that," Ethan said. "And I'm not going to tell you it's too late because Noah's 7, and nothing is too late when a kid is 7. But I am going to tell you this." He leaned forward slightly. "Whatever you decide to do from here, whether you want to be in his life, whether you want to try to rebuild something, that is a conversation you have with Olivia. Not with me. I am not the person who gets to grant you access to that boy." "Then who are you?" Derek said. "To him." The question sat there. Ethan considered it with the honesty it deserved. "I don't know yet," he said. "We're figuring that out, all of us." "But you're going to stay," Derek said, not aggressive, asking. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I'm going to stay." Derek nodded, slow, like he was accepting a ruling he'd already known was coming, but needed to hear out loud. "Is he happy?" Derek asked. And the question was so stripped of anything else. No ego, no territory, no strategy. Just the bare core question of a man who had not been present and suddenly needed to know the answer to the most basic thing. "He's a good kid," Ethan said. "Sharp, funny. He named an imaginary country after his best friend. He drives screws in one try. He sleeps with his birdhouse on the nightstand because he wants to see it when he wakes up and remember it's real." He held Derek's gaze. "He's doing okay. But he could be doing better. And that part that's on you, not on me." Derek sat with that. He nodded. He picked up his coffee. They sat there for another 20 minutes, not as adversaries, not as friends, but as two men who had both in different ways been given a stake in the same child's life, one by accident of biology and one by accident of a parking lot and a broken bicycle chain, and who both understood in that diner on that Sunday morning that the child was the only thing that actually mattered. Derek left first. Ethan stayed for a second cup of coffee. He sat in the booth alone with his hands on the table and thought about what had just happened. He thought about Roy Hargrove, who had apparently been quietly running some kind of community intervention from behind his paint counter, and decided he was going to have words with Roy the next time he went in for supplies. Then he thought about Noah, about the word he'd used yesterday without planning to. Brothers. He paid the check and drove home. That was Sunday. By Wednesday, the town was talking. Ethan didn't know exactly how it started. Small towns didn't require a single source. They required a critical mass of partial information and enough proximity for it to travel. What he knew was that by Wednesday afternoon, 3 people had made a point of approaching him in ways that weren't accidental. First was Carol Briggs, whose son was in Jake's class, who stopped him in the pickup line and said with the particular smile of someone delivering news, "They're pretending is casual. I heard you had quite a morning at the Dad and Me event. Derek Holt of all people. How are you holding up?" Ethan said he was fine and moved on. Second was his business partner Marcus, who called that evening and said, "Man, you know people are talking about you stepping in for some woman's kid at the school thing, right? A few of the dads in my neighborhood were talking about it at the rec center. Some of them think it's a good thing. Some of them think—" Marcus paused. "Some of them think it's something else." "What something else?" Ethan said. "The usual," Marcus said. "You know how people are. She's a single mom. You're a single dad. Derek shows up and makes a scene. Suddenly everyone's got a theory." "Let them have theories," Ethan said. "Ethan, some of the theories are about you chasing a married woman." "She's not married." "Derek Holt told someone at the rec center that you're trying to take his family." The sentence landed with a weight that surprised him. Not because it hurt, because it was effective, because he could already feel the mechanism of it working. The way a phrase like that traveled, accumulated, became a thing. People repeated without examining until it had the weight of fact, regardless of truth. "I'm going to call Olivia," Ethan said. "Yeah," Marcus said. "You should do that." He called Olivia. She picked up on the second ring, and before he said anything, she said, "I know. Janet from Noah's class texted me 20 minutes ago. Someone told someone that Derek's been saying you pursued this, that you inserted yourself into our lives on purpose." He said that. Someone who knows Derek said that. Her voice was controlled. Precisely controlled. Which means Derek either said it or someone is saying it on his behalf, because Derek couldn't do it directly after sitting across from you in a diner. Ethan processed that. "He moved faster than I expected." "He always does," Olivia said. "It's the one consistent thing about him. When he feels cornered, he creates a narrative first." "What do you want to do?" Ethan said. "I want to be angry for about 10 more minutes," she said. "And then I want to figure out what we do next." He waited. 9 minutes passed. He knew because he was watching the clock. Then she said, "We don't do anything." "Olivia, we don't respond to it. We don't explain ourselves to the pickup line. We don't post anything, we don't call anyone, we don't send any messages that can be screenshot. We just—" She exhaled. "We just keep doing what we're doing. Because the only thing that counters a false story is a true one, and the true one is written in what we actually do." Ethan thought about that. "That's harder than fighting back," he said. "I know," she said. "That's how you know it's right." I was quiet for a moment. "Noah doesn't hear any of this," he said. "Never," she said immediately. "Jake either." "Agreed." Another pause. "Ethan," she said. "Yeah. I'm sorry that you're getting pulled into something you didn't ask for." He thought about the paint store, the linseed oil, the question that stopped time. "I walked into it with my eyes open," he said. "Don't apologize for that." She was quiet on the other end of the line for a moment. Okay, she said finally. Okay. He was about to hang up when she said, one more thing. Yeah. Derek called me this afternoon, before the rumors. He asked if he could see Noah. The kitchen went very still. What did you say? Ethan asked. I said I needed time to think. Her voice was careful, precise. I said I'd let him know. And I don't know, she said. That's the honest answer. He's Noah's biological father. He has not legally, not formally, but in the way that a child is always going to wonder, he has a place in this. And if Noah someday wants to know him, and I blocked that because I was angry, or because it was inconvenient, or because... She stopped. I don't want to make that decision for Noah and have it come back wrong. What does your gut say? Ethan said. My gut says Derek isn't ready, Olivia said. My gut says he's acting from ego right now, not from love, and bringing that into Noah's life, the inconsistent version, the showing up when it benefits him version, is worse than the clean absence. Your gut's right, Ethan said. But my gut isn't all that's at stake here. No, he agreed. It's not. Thursday came. Then Friday. The rumors continued to move in the background at their own pace the way rumors did in a town. This size, half the people had heard something. A quarter of them had added to it, and the other quarter were either above it or simply hadn't been in the right conversation yet. Ethan went about his life. He picked Jake up from school. He submitted a job quote for a commercial property on Elm Street. He called Roy Hargrove and said, "Did you give my number to Derek Holt?" And Roy said, "I did." And then a silence. And then Roy said, he needed to talk to the right person instead of the wrong one. I made a judgment call. And Ethan said, next time ask me first. And Roy said, if I'd asked you, you'd have said no. Which was true, so Ethan let it go. Friday afternoon, he was in his truck in the school parking lot when Marcus texted, "You need to see this." A screenshot followed. It was a post from a local Facebook group, the kind of community group that was ostensibly for neighborhood updates and lost dogs, but functioned primarily as a venue for exactly this kind of thing. The post was from an account Ethan didn't recognize, a woman named Terry, and it said, "Heads up to parents at Riverside Elementary. There's apparently a man who's been making himself a father figure to a child that isn't his, and the real father is trying to reconnect. Anyone who thinks this is appropriate behavior should speak up. Our kids deserve protection from adults with unclear motives. No names. But enough detail that anyone at the school event would know exactly who it meant." Ethan read it twice. His first feeling was anger. Clean, immediate, the kind that came with a sharp edge and a clear direction. His second feeling, coming about 30 seconds behind the first, was something more complicated. Something that understood this was exactly what Derek had been counting on. That the point of the post wasn't the post itself. The point was what Ethan would do next. If he responded, he confirmed the story had legs. If he stayed quiet, the story moved without his voice in it. He put the phone down. He sat in the parking lot until the bell rang and Jake came out through the school doors, backpack bouncing, looking for the truck with the particular scanning look of a kid who trusted his dad would be there and was just confirming it. Ethan lifted his hand from the driver's window. Jake waved and ran. He got in the truck and said, "Can Noah come over Saturday again?" "Let me check with his mom," Ethan said. "Dad," Jake said. "Yeah, people at school are saying stuff." Ethan looked at him. Jake was looking straight ahead at the dashboard. "What kind of stuff?" Ethan said. "About you and Noah's mom, and about how Noah's real dad is mad." Jake picked at the edge of his seatbelt. "Tyler Morrison said his mom said you were causing trouble." "What do you think?" Ethan said. Jake turned his head and looked at his father with the steady, serious gaze that he'd had since he was 4 years old. The gaze that saw things and reported them accurately. "I think Tyler Morrison's mom wasn't there," Jake said. "And you were." Ethan held his son's gaze for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "That's right." Jake nodded, satisfied, and turned back to the window. "Can we get food on the way home? I'm hungry." "What do you want?" "Tacos." "Done." They drove. Ethan made a decision in the truck, somewhere between the school and the taco place, quietly and without drama. The way he made most decisions that mattered, not reactively, not defensively, but from the place in him that had always known the difference between what other people were saying and what was actually true. He was not going to respond to the post. He was not going to explain himself to the pickup line or the Facebook group or the rec center conversations. I was going to call Olivia tonight, and he was going to say, "We need to take the kids somewhere this weekend. Somewhere out of this town for a day. Somewhere that's just us." And then they were going to figure out the next part together. He called her at 8 after Jake was in bed. She picked up on the first ring. "I saw it." "I figured." "I took the post down," she said. "I reported it as harassment. I don't know if it'll do anything, but I'm not letting it just sit there." "Good. Ethan, she stopped. "What?" "I keep thinking this is my fault. That I put you in this by walking up to you in that paint store and asking you to be something you never signed up for, and now you're getting dragged through something you didn't choose." "Olivia." "I mean it. If I hadn't come to you, Olivia." His voice was quiet but firm. "You didn't do this to me. Derek did this, and the people who chose to repeat it, and not one of those people matters more than the two boys who are going to wake up Saturday morning and want to spend time together." She was quiet. "Take the kids somewhere Saturday," he said. "All four of us, out of this town. Somewhere they can just be kids." A pause. "Where?" she said. "There's a state park 40 minutes east. Jake's been asking to go for months. Trails a creek, a shelter where we could have lunch." "Noah would love that," she said softly. "Then we go." Another pause. "Just like that. Just like that." "People are going to talk more if we're seen together." "People are going to talk regardless," Ethan said. "Might as well give them something true to talk about." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then quietly, "Okay." "Okay," he said. I was about to hang up when she said his name again. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. Just a pause. "Thank you for not running." He thought about the parking lot of Hargrove's, the question that stopped time, the choice he'd made standing in the oil paint aisle between the Williamsburg and the Gamblin cans. "I told Noah I'd come back," Ethan said. "I meant it." She was quiet on the other end of the line. "Good night, Ethan," she said. "Good night." He sat in the kitchen after he hung up in the particular quiet of a house where a child was sleeping and the rest of the night belonged to the adult moving through it. He thought about Derek Holt in the diner, saying that should have been me. He thought about the Facebook post which he had not responded to and would not respond to. He thought about a 7-year-old boy who had packed a backpack for a playdate like he was going somewhere important. I thought about what Roy Hargrove had said, which was he needed to talk to the right person instead of the wrong one. And he thought about the wrong person. Not Derek. Not the Facebook group. Not the murmuring parents at the pickup line. The wrong person was the voice in Ethan's own chest that had been saying for 5 years that he was a man whose world was already too full and too fragile to add anything new. That voice had been wrong. He recognized that now. He got up, rinsed his glass, turned off the kitchen light. On his way upstairs, he passed the refrigerator. The drawing was still there. "This is us." 2 figures. Tools between them. A structure taking shape. He stood in front of it for a moment. Then he went to bed. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold and exactly right. Ethan had the truck packed a cooler. Jake's trail shoes, 2 extra jackets he'd grabbed on instinct when Olivia pulled up at 9 with Noah in the back seat, in a puffy yellow vest that made him look like a small and extremely cheerful construction sign. Noah got out of the car and said immediately, "Jake, do you know how far we can throw a rock into a creek if we find the right angle?" Jake said, "Dad, can we find rocks?" Ethan said, "There will be rocks." Noah said, "Yes," with a level of satisfaction that suggested the morning was already a success. They loaded into the truck Olivia in the passenger seat, both boys in the back, and pulled out of the neighborhood onto the county road that ran east toward the state park. The boys talked the entire way. About rocks, about the birdhouse, about a kid at school named Cooper, who had apparently done something so dramatically wrong in kickball that it required a full 10-minute joint account from both Jake and Noah, each adding details the other had forgotten their voices, overlapping and correcting and building on each other with the rhythm of two people who had developed their own language. Ethan drove. Olivia sat beside him. At some point, maybe 15 minutes into the drive, her shoulder relaxed against the seat in a way it hadn't been when she got in the car, and the set of her jaw loosened slightly, and she looked out the window at the November countryside moving past. "This is nice," she said, quietly, not to the boys, to Ethan. "Yeah," he said. And it was. They were 30 minutes from the state park, and the boys were now debating rock-throwing technique with the seriousness of engineers, and the gray sky was sitting low and gentle over the county road, and something in the cab of the truck felt settled in a way that Ethan hadn't felt anywhere in a long time. He wasn't going to say it out loud. He wasn't ready to say it out loud. But it was there. Quiet, certain, and entirely real. Like something that had been waiting at the edge of his life for a very long time, had finally stepped inside. He kept driving. The road ran east. And behind them, the town and its rumors, and Derek Holt and the Facebook post, and the pickup line conversations, and all the rest of it, stayed exactly where it belonged, behind them getting smaller in the rearview mirror with every mile. The state park was exactly what it needed to be. Not spectacular. Not the kind of place that made you stop and say something about it. Just 40 acres of trails and creek and bare November trees, and enough open air to make a person feel like the town they'd driven away from was somewhere much farther than 30 minutes. The boys were out of the truck before Ethan had the engine off. Noah went straight for the creek bank, which was technically 20 yards from the parking area and theoretically off-limits until the adults caught up, but Noah had spotted it from the window during the last quarter mile of the drive and had been vibrating with contained energy ever since, and the moment both feet hit gravel, he was gone. Jake followed without discussion. This was their dynamic. Noah identified the thing. Jake moved toward it with him. They operated like a two-man unit that had been running together far longer than 3 months. Olivia called after them. "Stay where I can see you." Noah called back. "I can see you seeing us." She looked at Ethan. "Is that an answer?" In his mind, Ethan said absolutely. They walked the path toward the creek at a pace that was slower than necessary, and both of them knew it. The cold air moved around them. Their breath showed. The boys' voices carried back from the water, the specific high-frequency excitement of children who have found rocks of sufficient throwing quality and are now debating trajectory. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia said. "Yeah, the diner," she said. "With Derek. What did he actually say? Not the summary you gave me on the phone. What did he actually say?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. He said he felt like someone had taken something that was his. Olivia made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Of course he did." And then he said it should have been him, teaching Noah the screw, being there. She was quiet. "I believe him," Ethan said. She looked at him sharply. "You believe Derek Holt?" "I believe that he felt it," Ethan said carefully. "In that moment, watching that video, or hearing about it, or however he found out, I think he felt it genuinely. I don't think that makes him ready to be Noah's father. Feeling something and being capable of acting on it consistently are two completely different things." Olivia walked for a moment without speaking. "He called again," she said. "Thursday night, after the Facebook post." Ethan looked at her. "You didn't tell me that." "I know." She glanced at him sideways. "I didn't know how." "What did he say?" "He said he was sorry about the post, that he hadn't authorized it, that Terry is his cousin, and she acted on her own." Olivia's jaw tightened slightly. "He said he'd asked her to take it down." "Did she?" "Eventually, after I reported it." She stopped walking for a moment, looked at the boys who were both crouched at the water's edge, now arguing over a particular rock. "He said he wanted to do things differently, that he wanted to talk to me about seeing Noah." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I needed to talk to someone first." Ethan looked at her. "Who?" She met his eyes. "You." The creek moved. The boys talked. A bird called once from somewhere up in the bare branches, and then was quiet. Why me? Ethan said. Because you're the person in this situation who has the clearest view of it, Olivia said. You don't have my history with Derek. You don't have my fear of getting it wrong. You're not Noah's father, and you're not pretending to be, and that means you can see it without all the weight I bring to it. Ethan thought about that. You're asking me if you should let Derek see Noah, he said. I'm asking you what you think, she said. The decision is mine. He walked for a moment. You know what the risk is if you let him in and he's not ready, Ethan said. Noah gets a version of his father that shows up enthusiastically and then doesn't show up at all. And that's a specific kind of hurt, the one that comes from being chosen and then unchosen. He's already organized himself around the absence. The absence he understands. The presence that disappears is harder. Yes, she said quietly, but you also know what it cost Noah if Derek does the work and becomes something real, and you kept that door closed. Yes. So what you're really asking, Ethan said, is how you figure out which version of Derek you're dealing with. She looked at him. Is there a way to know? Not without giving him a chance to show you, Ethan said. Which is the thing you don't want to do. I hate this, she said. I know. They'd reached the creek bank close enough to the boys now that further adult conversation required lowering their voices, which they both did, without discussing it. The automatic downshift of parents talking about things children shouldn't carry. Noah was showing Jake something in the water. A rock formation maybe, or a pattern of current. His hands were moving in the careful, explanatory gestures of a child who needed the other person to understand exactly what they were seeing. He found out something about the creek from a book, Olivia said softly. He read about sediment layers last week, and he said, Mom, do you think Ethan's creek will have them? She paused. He called it your creek. Ethan looked at Noah. Noah looked up at that moment the way kids do when they feel attention land on them, and saw Ethan watching, and his face did the thing it always did, that brief bright opening like a window. Ethan, Noah called, come look at this. Ethan walked down the bank. He crouched beside Noah and looked at what the boy was pointing at, a section of the creek bed where the water ran clear over a layer of dark-banded stone. Sediment layers, Noah said with the authority of a 7-year-old who had read a library book on the subject and was now the foremost expert. See how the dark parts and the light parts go. Each layer is like a year. They stack up. How many layers you think are here? Ethan said. Noah counted carefully, moving his finger along without touching. At least 12. So 12 years of creek, Ethan said. At least. Noah sat back on his heels. Jake thinks they're just rocks. I didn't say just rocks, Jake protested. I said they're rocks. Without acknowledging the layers, Noah said in a tone that suggested this was a significant oversight. Jake looked at Ethan. They're rocks, right? I'm not wrong. You're both right, Ethan said. They're rocks with layers. Neither boy was fully satisfied with this, which was fine. Some arguments didn't need resolution. Some arguments were just the sound of two people figuring out how to think together. Ethan stood up. Olivia was watching from a few feet back, and the expression on her face was the one he'd been seeing more often lately, the layered one, the one that was warm and careful and slightly afraid all at the same time. He met her eyes. She looked away first. They ate lunch at the shelter table at 12:30. Sandwiches, chips, apple slices that Noah ate with the systematic dedication of someone completing a required task. The kind of eating that suggested he didn't love apple slices, but had decided to be reasonable about them. Jake ate half his sandwich and then got involved in a detailed plan with Noah about building a rock dam in the shallower part of the creek that would require parental supervision and probably result in at least one wet shoe. You know, one of them is going in, Olivia said quietly to Ethan. Noah, Ethan said. Jake, she said. They looked at each other. $20, Ethan said. Deal, she said. It was Jake. Left shoe, ankle deep, retrieved with a startled yell that immediately became laughter. Ethan waded in to pull him out with the patience of a man who had been doing exactly this kind of thing for 8 years and had long since made peace with the role of sock dryer and wet shoe carrier. Olivia collected $20 from Ethan on the bank with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who knew her son. Noah was standing on the bank watching Jake get extracted, and his expression was a precise combination of sympathy and vindication. "I told you the current was stronger on the left side," he said to Jake. "You told me after I fell in," Jake pointed out. "I was still processing the information," Noah said. They walked back to the truck at 2 in the afternoon, with wet shoes and muddy knees, and the particular satisfied quiet of children who have used a day correctly. Noah fell asleep in the back seat before they hit the county road. Jake lasted another 8 minutes, and then was gone too. His head tipped against the window, one hand still loosely curled around a rock he'd kept from the creek. Ethan drove. Olivia sat in the passenger seat in the November afternoon and watched the road, and didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "I don't know what to do about you." Ethan glanced at her. "How do you mean?" "I mean—" She stopped. Tried again. "I mean that I came to a paint store with a very contained plan, a specific limited thing. One day, one event, one favor. And now it's been 3 weeks, and you're the person I call first when something goes wrong. And you're the person my son calls your creek. And you're the person I just made a $20 bet with over which of our kids falls in the water first." Her voice was level, but there was something underneath it that wasn't. "And I don't know how to hold all of that and still be smart about it." Ethan drove for a moment. "What does being smart about it look like?" he said. "It looks like not letting my son fall in love with a situation that isn't permanent," she said quietly. The word permanent moved through the air of the cab. "Is that what you think this is?" Ethan said. "Impermanent." She looked at him. "I don't know what it is, Ethan. That's what I'm saying. I don't know, and Noah doesn't understand the concept of not knowing, and Jake seems to have already made some kind of internal decision that I can read on his face every time he looks at Noah, and meanwhile, I'm trying to be—" She pressed her hands flat on her thighs. "I'm trying to be the adult in the room." "You are the adult in the room," Ethan said. "So are you." "Yeah." "So tell me what this is," she said. The road ran ahead of them through the November afternoon. The boys slept in the back. The heater ran. A mile passed, then 2. Ethan said, "It's the truest thing that's happened to me in 5 years." The cab was quiet. "That scares me more than you know," she said. "I know," he said. "Me too." She looked out the passenger window. Her reflection moved in the glass present and transparent at the same time. "My track record with trust is not—" She stopped. "I know," he said again. "I'm not trying to compare you to Derek," she said quickly. "I'm not doing that. I know you're not. I just—" She turned to look at him. "The last time I trusted someone with this much, I ended up alone with a 7-day-old baby and a text message saying he wasn't coming back." The truck carried that for a moment. "I'm not leaving," Ethan said. "You can't know that. Olivia." He said her name the way he said things when he meant them to land. "I have stayed at this table through one kid's homework for 5 years. I have shown up to jobs I didn't want, and school events I was exhausted for, and Saturday mornings when I had nothing left. Showing up is not something I have to decide to do. It's the only mode I have." She held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at the road. Neither of them said anything else until they got back to town. He pulled up in front of her house on Carver Street and put the truck in park. In the back, Noah stirred, blinked, looked around with the mild confusion of a child waking up somewhere other than his bedroom. "Are we home?" Noah said. "Yeah," Olivia said. "We're home." Noah looked at Ethan, still half asleep, guard completely down the unfiltered version. "Same time next week," Noah said. Ethan looked in the rearview mirror at this boy, sleep-creased, muddy at the knees, the creek rock in his jacket pocket that he'd transferred there somewhere between the shelter and the truck. "Same time next week," Ethan said. Noah nodded, satisfied, and got out of the truck. Jake was still asleep. Olivia gathered their things, opened her door, then paused with one foot on the ground. "Ethan," she said. "Yeah." She looked at him. "I'm trying," she said. "I just need you to know that. Whatever it looks like from the outside, I'm trying." "I know," he said. She got out. He watched her walk Noah to the door, unlock it, let the boy inside, then turned back once and lifted her hand. He drove home. Jake woke up in his own driveway and said, "Did I miss anything?" And Ethan said, "Noah fell asleep on you, and you didn't notice." And Jake looked appropriately horrified by this information. That was Saturday. Monday arrived with the specific productive energy of a week that intended to get things done, and Ethan was 3 hours into a commercial job on Elm Street when his phone rang with Olivia's name on the screen. He stepped off the ladder. "What happened?" he said, because the time 10:14 in the morning on a Monday was not a casual call time. "Derek filed," she said. Everything in Ethan's chest went tight. "Filed what?" "He filed for visitation rights." Her voice was controlled the way a person's voice is controlled when they are holding themselves very carefully together. "I got a call from his attorney 20 minutes ago. He's claiming that Noah has been denied access to his biological father and that circumstances have recently changed, and he wants to establish a formal visitation schedule." Ethan stepped fully away from the job site, out of earshot of his crew. "He said circumstances have recently changed," Ethan said. "Yes." "Meaning me," Ethan said. "Meaning you," she confirmed. His attorney was very careful about the phrasing, but the implication was clear, that the presence of another man in Noah's life constituted a change that warranted Derek's involvement. The morning felt very flat suddenly. The ordinary sounds of Elm Street, a delivery truck, a dog somewhere whined in the trees along the sidewalk, continued without awareness of what had just happened. "Okay," Ethan said. "Okay," she said. "Ethan, I hear you," he said. I'm not panicking. Are you okay?" A pause. "I'm not panicking either. I'm angry. There's a difference." "Good," he said. "Anger's useful. Do you have an attorney?" "I'm calling one today." "Good." "Ethan." Her voice shifted slightly, still controlled, but with something underneath it that was asking something he hadn't heard yet. "He's going to make this about you. His attorney already implied that I was exposing Noah to an unstable adult situation. That what's happening between us is, they called it a precipitous romantic involvement." The phrase landed. "A precipitous romantic involvement," Ethan repeated. "Yes." He stood on the sidewalk on Elm Street and thought about that phrase and everything it was designed to do, the way it framed a man who had fixed a broken bicycle chain and come to a school event and taken 2 boys to throw rocks in a creek as something predatory, and calculated the way it was designed to make a judge look at 3 weeks of ordinary decency and see something other than what it was. "Are you asking me to step back?" he said, directly, because he needed to know, and she needed to be able to say it if that was the answer. The pause was 4 seconds long. "No," she said. "Olivia." "No," she said again, firmer. "I'm asking you if you're willing to stay in it even when it gets complicated, because it just got complicated." "I know it did." And I told you in the truck," he said. "Showing up is the only mode I have." Another pause, shorter this time. "His attorney is going to want to depose you," she said. "They're going to ask questions about your relationship with Noah and with me, and they're going to try to frame everything we've done in the worst possible light. They're going to make the diner look like a confrontation. They're going to make Dad and Me Day look like a scheme." She exhaled. "They're going to make the paint store look like something it wasn't." "Let them," Ethan said. Because what it was a woman who loved her son asking a stranger for help. And the stranger said yes. And then everyone showed up and did what they said they'd do. He paused. "A judge can look at that." She was quiet for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally. The same word she kept coming back to, not passive, not resigned, but the word of a person closing the loop on a decision. "Call the attorney," he said, "and call me after." "I will." He went back up the ladder. His hands were steady. His mind was running at a different frequency beneath the steady surface. The frequency of a man who understood that the next phase of this was going to require something. He hadn't been asked to give, yet not just showing up, but standing firm, while someone tried methodically to make the showing up look like something else. He had done it before. Not in court. Not in anything like this. But he had stood in a hospital room for 11 months while his wife got smaller and the world kept asking him how he was holding up. And he had stood in a cemetery in the rain with a 3-year-old who didn't fully understand what the ceremony meant. And he had stood at Jake's school every single morning for 5 years while other dads stood beside wives and he stood alone. He knew how to hold a position, even when it cost something, even when every circumstance suggested it might be easier to step back. He knew how. He worked through the afternoon. At 4:15, walking to his truck, he got a text from a number he didn't recognize. He opened it. It was from Derek. It said, "I didn't want it to go this way. My attorney moved faster than I expected. I'm sorry." Ethan read it twice. He thought about typing back. He put his phone in his pocket and drove to pick up Jake. Jake was waiting at the curb with his backpack on and the particular expression of a kid who had news. "What happened?" Ethan said before Jake opened the door. Jake got in. "How do you always know?" "You have a news face," Ethan said. Jake considered this with mild offense. "Noah's not at school today." Ethan looked at him. "What? How wasn't there?" "Mrs. Keller said he was going to be absent, and Tyler Morrison said that he heard Noah's dad is trying to take him away." Jake looked at Ethan with the direct gaze that never flinched. "Is that true?" Ethan thought about how to say the true thing in a way that didn't transfer adult weight onto an 8-year-old's shoulders. "Noah's dad wants to be part of his life," Ethan said carefully. "That's something Noah's mom and dad are going to work out with some help from people whose job is to figure those things out." "Is Noah going to have to leave?" Jake said. "No," Ethan said. "Nobody's going anywhere." "How do you know?" "Because his mom is not going to let that happen," Ethan said, "and she's good at fighting for what matters." Jake absorbed this. "Are you going to help her?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "I am." Jake nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Because Noah's my best friend, and if something happened to Noah," he looked out the window, "I'd be really mad." "I know, buddy." "At you," Jake added, "if you didn't help." Ethan looked at his son. Noted. "Okay." Jake seemed satisfied. He reached into his backpack. "I have math homework." "Let's see it." Normal, ordinary. The math homework, the kitchen table, the afternoon moving through its hours. But underneath it running at that different frequency, the awareness that something had shifted. The week passed in a state of controlled motion. Ethan worked. Jake went to school. Olivia's attorney filed a response. Ethan got a call from Olivia's attorney on Wednesday asking him to provide a written account of his interactions with Noah since October. He sat at the kitchen table that night and wrote it out every ordinary moment. The fixed bike chain and the oil paint store and the dad and me day and the park and the creek and the rock with the sediment layers. And it read written out in plain prose exactly like what it was. A man who had shown up. Nothing more, nothing less. He sent it to the attorney on Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon his phone rang. "Olivia." He picked up. "How are you?" "Derek withdrew," she said. Ethan went still. "What?" "He called his attorney this morning and told them to withdraw the filing." Her voice was careful, measured processing as she spoke. "His attorney called mine at noon. It's done." "What happened?" "I don't know exactly," she said. "His attorney said Derek reconsidered after reviewing the documentation. But Ethan..." She paused. "He called me. After the withdrawal. Directly." "What did he say?" She was quiet for a moment. "He said he read your account, the one you submitted. He said he sat with it for 2 days." Another pause. He said he realized that what he was fighting against wasn't something wrong. That he was fighting against someone doing right by Noah because it made him feel like he'd failed. The kitchen was quiet around Ethan. "He said that," Ethan said. "He said that." Her voice was low and full of something complicated. "He said he didn't want Noah's life turned into a courtroom. That Noah deserved better than that." A breath. "He said he's going to get a therapist and do the work and approach this differently. That when he's ready, really ready, he's going to ask me to introduce him to Noah properly. No legal leverage, no attorneys, just asking." Ethan processed this. "Do you believe him?" he said. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I believe the therapist part might be true, because his attorney sounded surprised when he called them, which means it wasn't strategic. It was a decision Derek made privately and acted on before he could talk himself out of it." "That's different from the man who posted through his cousin," Ethan said. "It is different," she agreed. "It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't make him reliable. But it's different." Another pause. "I cried for about an hour after I hung up," she said. "I don't fully know why. Relief, I think. But also something else." "What?" "Grief, maybe," she said quietly. "For the version of this story where Derek was what he should have been from the beginning. Where none of this had to happen." She let out a long breath. "It's a stupid thing to grieve." "It's not," Ethan said. "You can grieve anything," she said. "No," he said. "You're grieving the life Noah should have had. That's not stupid. That's love." Silence. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Can we have dinner, the four of us? Not a big thing. Just dinner." "Friday," Ethan said. "Friday," she said. "My house," he said. "I'll cook." A pause. "You cook." "Jake would take issue with the word cook," Ethan admitted. "But I produce hot food on a consistent basis." She laughed. A real one, the kind that came from somewhere below the controlled surface. Friday, she said. "Friday," he said. He put the phone down. He sat in the kitchen for a moment. Outside, the November afternoon was going gray at the edges, the light pulling back early the way it did this time of year. Inside, the house was warm and quiet, and smelled like the last of the coffee he'd made that morning, and hadn't quite finished. He thought about Derek Holt reading a written account of ordinary moments and deciding to stop fighting. He thought about what it took to make that decision. He thought about what it cost. He thought about a man who had spent 7 years choosing absence, and then spent 3 weeks watching someone else choose presence, and had finally understood in whatever private interior reckoning happens when a person forces themselves to be honest what he had actually given up. I didn't feel triumphant about it. He felt mostly tired, and grateful, and quietly aware of how close the whole thing had come to going the other direction. He picked up his phone and texted Jake, who was at Marcus's house for the afternoon dinner at home Friday. "Noah and his mom are coming." Jake responded in 45 seconds. "Yes. Can we have tacos?" Ethan smiled. "I'll see what I can do," he typed back. Jake, "Dad. Tacos." Ethan, "I heard you." Jake, "Tacos." He put the phone down. For the first time in 3 weeks, the frequency underneath things was quiet. Not silent. It was never fully silent. Not in a life that had this many moving parts and this many people with stakes in the outcome. But quiet. The particular quiet of a situation that had just survived something and was still standing. He got up. He checked what he had in the refrigerator. He was going to need to go to the store. He made a list. He put tacos at the top. Friday came the way. Good things come after hard weeks, quietly without fanfare, with the specific relief of a day that had no court filings, or attorney calls, or Facebook posts attached to it. Ethan was in the kitchen at 5:15 when Jake appeared in the doorway, still in his school clothes, assessed the situation on the counter with the focused eye of a child who had been promised tacos and said, "That doesn't look like tacos." "It's going to be tacos," Ethan said. When I finish the part that comes before tacos." Jake studied the onions on the cutting board. "What comes before tacos?" "Everything that makes them worth eating." Jake considered this with the expression of someone who found the philosophy questionable but was willing to wait for the evidence. He pulled himself up onto the counter, a habit Ethan had been discouraging since Jake was 4, with absolutely no success, and sat there with his elbows on his knees watching. "Dad," he said. "Yeah." "Is everything okay now with Noah's situation?" Ethan kept cutting. "Yeah, it's okay. Derek's not going to take him." "Derek withdrew," Ethan said. "That means he decided not to pursue it." Jake was quiet for a moment, processing. Why did he change his mind? "Because he made a better decision than the one he started with," Ethan said. People can do that. It doesn't happen as often as it should, but it happens. Jake thought about that. Do you think Noah knows? His mom will tell him what he needs to know in the way that's right for him, Ethan said. That's her job. We don't need to bring it up tonight. Okay. Jake picked at the edge of his sleeve. Dad? Still here. Do you like Olivia? The knife paused for exactly 1 second, then continued. Yes, Ethan said. I like Olivia. Like, Jake said with the intonation of someone deploying a technical term. Jake. I'm just asking. You're 8. I know what like means, Jake said with dignity. Cooper in my class likes Maya, and everyone can tell because he saved her a seat at the lunch table 3 days in a row. That's very observant, Ethan said. Dad? Jake. Do you? Ethan set the knife down, turned and looked at his son, who was sitting on the counter with his elbows on his knees, and the patient expression of someone who had already decided they were going to wait as long as it took. I think Olivia is one of the most honest people I've met in a long time, Ethan said. And I think what's happening between all 4 of us is something real, and something good, and something that I want to keep showing up for. He held Jake's gaze. Is that enough of an answer? Jake thought about it seriously. I think that means yes, he said. That means yes, Ethan confirmed. Jake nodded. Good. Because Noah told me his mom smiles more on the days she talks to you. Ethan looked at his son for a moment. Get off the counter, he said. Jake got off the counter fully satisfied and went to set the table without being asked, which had never happened before in the history of their household, and would probably never happen again, but which Ethan chose to accept as a sign that the evening was going to go all right. They arrived at 6. Noah first through the door, as was his pattern, moving immediately toward the kitchen with his nose preceding him by approximately half a second. Tacos, he said with the reverence of a religious confirmation. Tacos, Ethan agreed. Jake appeared from the living room. I told you. You told me tacos, Noah said. You didn't tell me they'd smell like that. They smell like tacos, Jake said. They smell like good tacos, Noah said. There's a difference. Olivia appeared in the doorway behind them, unwinding her scarf with the ease of someone who had stopped treating this house like a place she needed to be careful in, and something about that ease. The way she moved through the door without hesitating. The way she hung her coat on the hook by the door without being shown where it was hit. Ethan quietly and directly in the chest. She had started belonging here without either of them making a formal declaration about it. That was what belonging looked like. Not announced, just present. It smells incredible in here, she said. Dad won't tell me what he put in it, Jake said. Cumin, Ethan said. He says that every time, Jake told Noah. I don't think cumin is the whole answer. It's never the whole answer, Olivia said, moving into the kitchen, already reaching for the cabinet where the glasses were. She knew which cabinet she'd put them back herself 2 Saturdays ago, and something in Ethan's chest did the thing it had been doing with increasing frequency lately. The warm, slightly terrifying thing that he had stopped trying to not feel. Dinner was loud and specific and exactly right. Noah had strong opinions about the taco assembly order that he defended with the confidence of a 7-year-old who had read about culinary structure in an encyclopedia he'd found in the school library. Jake disagreed on principle because Noah was certain, and certainty in one's best friend required at least nominal resistance. Olivia ate 2 tacos without commentary, and then said quietly to Ethan, "This is the best thing I've eaten in 2 weeks." And he said, "Cumin," and she smiled into her glass. After dinner, the boys disappeared into Jake's room with the yellow birdhouse and a plan involving string and a pencil that Ethan did not fully understand but deemed low risk. The door was open. Their voices came down the hallway in the easy rhythm of 2 kids who had found their frequency together. Ethan washed dishes. Olivia dried them. This had become its own thing, the post-dinner kitchen routine, the division of tasks that had organized itself without discussion. The particular quiet of 2 people moving around each other in a small space with the comfort of people who had stopped being careful about taking up room. "He asked me tonight," Olivia said, drying a plate. "Noah." He asked me if you were going to be his dad." Ethan's hand stilled in the water. "What did you say?" he said. "I said that was a big question," she said. He said he knew it was a big question. He said that's why he was asking. She set the plate down. He said he wanted to know if it was going to stay, the way things are right now. He said he liked it, and he didn't want it to go away. Ethan turned off the water. He stood at the sink with his hands still wet and looked at Olivia, who was holding the dish towel against her chest and looking back at him with the expression she wore when she was being completely honest and completely afraid at the same time. "What did you tell him?" Ethan said. "I told him I thought it was going to stay," she said. "I told him that some things take time to become what they're going to be, but that the people in it were good people who meant what they said." She paused. He said, "Mom, Ethan means what he says. I know because he never forgot." The hallway was quiet for a moment. The boys' voices continued from Jake's room, low and absorbed. "Never forgot what?" Ethan said. "He wouldn't say," Olivia said. "He just said that. He never forgot." And then he went to brush his teeth like he hadn't just... She stopped. Her voice had gone slightly rough at the edges. She pressed her lips together. "Like he hadn't just said something that broke me open a little." Ethan reached over and took the dish towel from her hands. She let him take it. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I need you to answer it the same way you answered me in the paint store. All of it. The real version." She looked at him. "Do you want this?" he said. "Not the logical version, not the careful version, not the version where you've weighed the risks and determined it's an acceptable gamble." He held her gaze. "Do you actually want this? Us? What this is becoming?" The kitchen was very quiet. From down the hall came the distant sound of Jake laughing at something Noah said. Bright and uncalculated, the sound of two kids in a room together without any awareness of what was happening in the kitchen, because they had already decided in the way children decide things that this was simply how things were. Olivia said yes, just that. Not with conditions. Not with qualifications. Not with the measured preamble of a woman who had learned to protect herself by surrounding every answer with context. Just yes. Ethan nodded. He picked the dish towel back up and handed it to her. "Okay," he said. She took it. And then she laughed, the involuntary kind, the kind that comes when the thing you've been holding finally gets to move. "Okay," she said. "We'll figure out the rest," he said. "There's a lot of rest," she said. "I know." "Derek," she said. "The future. What we tell the kids and when. What this," she gestured between them. "What this actually looks like in the context of real life." "I know," he said. "We'll figure it out." "You say that like it's simple." "It's not simple," he said. "But it's what we're going to do." She looked at him for a moment, with the expression that saw him clearly, the stubbornness and the steadiness, and the place in him that didn't bend. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think it is." 3 months passed. Not easily. Not without friction. Derek did what he said. He found a therapist, he did the work, and 8 weeks into it, he called Olivia and asked not to see Noah, but to speak with her directly, adult to adult, without attorneys or intermediaries. She agreed. They met for coffee. Ethan did not go. This was not his meeting to be in. She came to his house afterward with a specific expression that he'd learned to read, the one that meant something significant had happened, and she was still processing whether it was good. "He apologized," she said. "Really apologized," Ethan said. He said that for 7 years, he told himself the absence was protecting Noah, and the therapist helped him understand that was a story he built to protect himself from the shame of the choice he'd made. She sat down at the kitchen table, both hands around a coffee mug. "He said he's not asking for anything right now. He's not putting a timeline on it. He just wanted me to know that when Noah is ready, if Noah ever wants to know him, he's going to be ready to be known." "How do you feel about that?" Ethan said. "Complicated," she said, "but less angry than I expected." "That's something," Ethan said. "It is," she agreed. She looked at the refrigerator. The drawing was still there. It had been there since November. "This is us." 2 figures, tools between them, a structure taking shape. "He drew another one," Olivia said. Ethan looked at her. Noah, last week. He didn't give it to me. I found it in his desk when I was looking for a permission slip. She paused. It was the same two figures, but this time there were four. Ethan was very still. 4, he said. 4, she said. She held his gaze. He drew a family, she said, quietly, without drama. Just the plain word placed down carefully between them, like something that needed to be handled with both hands. Ethan looked at the drawing on the refrigerator for a long moment. Then he got up, went to the drawer by the stove where he kept tape and scissors and the general miscellany of a household with a child, and he pulled out a piece of tape. He went to the refrigerator. He put the tape on the top corner of the drawing, pressing the edge more firmly to the surface. It had been curling slightly at the corner for 2 weeks. He pressed it flat. He stepped back. "When do we tell them?" he said. "Tell them what?" Olivia said. "That this is what we're doing," Ethan said. "That the four of us are, that this is what we're building." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "I think Noah already knows," she said. "Jake too," Ethan admitted. "Then maybe," she said, "we tell them when we know exactly what to call it. And until then we just keep showing up," he said. "Keep showing up," she agreed. He sat back down. They finished their coffee, and the Friday afternoons continued, and the Saturday mornings, and the school pickups where Ethan's truck appeared reliably at 3:15, and Noah had started looking for it the same way Jake did, the same scanning look, the same confirmation. There it is, there he is still there. He was always still there. One evening in February, a full 4 months after a Tuesday morning in an oil paint store. Ethan was sitting on the back steps with his coffee, while Jake and Noah ran circuits in the backyard in some kind of game that had its own elaborate rules that neither adult had been able to successfully decode. Olivia was inside on the phone with her sister. The February air was cold and clean. The boy's breath showed in small clouds when they ran. Noah stopped in front of him, suddenly out of breath, cheeks red from the cold. He looked at Ethan with the direct, steady gaze that saw things and reported them accurately. "Can I ask you something?" Noah said. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Why did you come back?" Noah said. "After the first time, at the event. You didn't have to come back." Ethan looked at this boy 7 years old, going on 8 with his mother's eyes and his own particular way of asking the true question instead of the comfortable one. He thought about how to answer it. He thought about the paint store, and the linseed oil, and the question that stopped time, and the diner, and the gymnasium, and the creek, and the sediment layers, and the attorney calls, and Derek in the diner, saying that should have been me, and a drawing on a refrigerator that said this is us. He thought about what he had said to Jake that first night. A kid chose someone, without being asked, without any agenda. He just looked around and pointed and said that one. And I think that deserves to be taken seriously. "Because you asked me to," Ethan said. "When you stood up in front of that room and said you did it in one try, that was you asking me to come back." Noah frowned slightly. "I didn't say your name." "You didn't have to," Ethan said. Noah thought about this. "Is that why you stayed?" "That's why I started," Ethan said. "I stayed because of what I found when I got here." Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he said very carefully in the measured voice of someone choosing words that have weight, "I'm glad you found it." "Me too," Ethan said. Noah nodded once with the gravity of a conclusion reached and accepted. Then Jake yelled his name from across the yard, and Noah turned and ran back into the game, and the elaborate rules resumed without explanation, and the February air moved around the yard, and Ethan Parker sat on the back steps of his house with his coffee going cold in his hands, and understood fully and without equivocation that this was his life. Not the one he'd planned, not the one he'd built out of grief and stubbornness, and the sheer necessity of keeping a child fed and loved and functional in the aftermath of the worst thing that had ever happened to him. This one, larger than that, fuller, with its own complications and its own history, and 2 children who had found each other in a second-grade classroom and decided without consultation that their families belonged together, and who had turned out against all the careful adult resistance to the idea to be absolutely right. Olivia came out and sat beside him. She didn't say anything. She had her own coffee. She put her shoulder against his lightly, the easy contact of someone who had stopped being careful about taking up space. They watched the boys. After a while, she said, "Noah asked me tonight why you came back." "He asked me too," Ethan said. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," Ethan said. She looked at him sideways. "Which part?" "All of it," he said. She looked back at the boys, and the smile that moved across her face was the real one, not the careful one, not the managed one, not the one she wore when she was holding something together, the one that came from the place she'd stopped guarding. The February night was cold and clear and steady. Jake and Noah ran their circuits in the backyard, their voices rising and falling in the easy rhythm of two children who had found their permanent frequency. And Ethan Parker sat on his back steps with the woman who had walked into a paint store on a Tuesday morning and asked a stranger for the most impossible ordinary thing. And he thought about the word that had moved through the kitchen 3 months ago and been placed between them like something that needed to be handled with both hands. Family. Not the one biology had assigned. Not the one he'd built out of grief. The one that had walked up to him in an oil paint store smelling of linseed and mineral spirits and looked at him with red-rimmed eyes and asked a question that stopped time. And he had said, "Not until you tell me the truth." And she had told him. And the truth had cost both of them something. And everything it had cost them had been worth it. He looked at the boys. He looked at Olivia. He picked up his coffee, which had gone cold, and drank it anyway. He was staying. He had always been going to stay. And some things, the truest ones, the ones that didn't need to be announced or argued for or defended against anything anyone said in a diner or a Facebook post or a courtroom. Some things were simply decided by the way a child looks up from a creek bed and says, "Come look at this," and the way a man walks down the bank and crouches to eye level and looks and understands in the particular clarity of a moment that has been quietly building since a Tuesday morning in November, that the life he is standing inside is exactly the one he was always going to end up in. He just needed someone to ask him a question he wasn't ready to hear, and mean every word of it, and tell him the whole truth when he pushed. Because some families are not born. They are built slowly in hardware stores and school gyms and creek banks and kitchen tables and Friday evenings and Saturday mornings by people who are tired and scared and still showing up anyway. By people who choose each other, again and again and again. Until choosing is just another word for staying. And staying is just another word for love.